Think about the last time your phone died while you were waiting somewhere. No charger, no screen, no music, just you sitting there for 15 minutes. If you are like most people today, that scenario does not just sound mildly inconvenient, it sounds absolutely terrifying. We have developed a profound, almost instinctual fear of silence. Every empty moment in our lives is instantly filled with scrolling, streaming, notifications, and an endless barrage of noise. But what if the very thing we are running away from is exactly what our biology desperately needs? What if boredom isn't a void to be filled, but a missing biological necessity?
That is exactly the paradox of the modern human condition. We are living in an era where our nervous systems are exposed to unprecedented, relentless levels of stimulation. Evolutionarily speaking, humans are hardwired to seek out novelty. It kept us alive. It helped us find food, spot predators, and learn about our environments. But the human brain was absolutely never designed for uninterrupted cognitive occupation. We are essentially running a high-performance engine at the red line 24 hours a day, and we are wondering why the machinery is starting to break down.
It is like we are permanently keeping our foot on the gas pedal. Historically, our ancestors experienced natural rhythms. There were bursts of intense focus or stimulation, hunting, gathering, socializing, but these were always followed by long stretches of stillness. Walking miles in silence, staring at a fire, today that rhythm is completely gone. We have replaced the natural pacing of the environment with a digital ecosystem that demands constant engagement.
Precisely. And the neurological consequences of that missing rhythm are quietly devastating. When we talk about this constant digital stimulation, we are not just talking about feeling a little tired at the end of the day. Emerging neuroscience shows that this lack of downtime actively impairs our attention spans, our ability to synthesize creative thoughts, our emotional regulation, and even the brain's baseline capacity to recover. We are witnessing the death of boredom, and with it, we might be witnessing the erosion of our creative cognitive reserve.
That phrase, the death of boredom, is so striking. It makes me think about what actually happens inside our heads when we are doing absolutely nothing. There is this massive misconception that a bored brain is an inactive brain, like a computer that has gone to sleep. But that could not be further from the truth, right?
It is the exact opposite. When you stop processing external information, when you put the phone down and just stare out a window, a highly complex network in your brain lights up. We call it the default mode network, or the DMN. This network is highly active during daydreaming, deep reflection, and mind-wandering. Ironically, your brain becomes incredibly productive when you are externally doing nothing.
So it is almost like the backstage crew of a theater. While the main play, our daily tasks and scrolling, is happening, the crew is waiting. But the moment the stage clears, they rush out to clean up, organize the props, and set the scene for the next act. If the play never stops, the stage just becomes a chaotic mess.
That is a brilliant way to put it. The default mode network is responsible for integrating information, simulating future possibilities, and forming creative associations. It is where memory consolidation happens. When you are constantly consuming content, you are taking in puzzle pieces, but you are never giving your brain the time to actually put the puzzle together. You need that cognitive stillness to connect the dots. Without it, you just have a pile of disconnected information.
Which perfectly explains why so many people today complain about brain fog, chronic mental fatigue, and a strange kind of emotional numbness. We are exhausting our cognitive reserves because we never allow that backstage crew to do their job. We are terrified of missing out on the latest trend or breaking news, but we are actually missing out on our own original thoughts.
And that leads to a profound collapse in creativity. True creative insight requires cognitive space. It requires mental drift. When every single second of your day is occupied by external input, from listening to a podcast while doing the dishes to scrolling while waiting for an elevator, the brain loses the opportunity to build internal narratives. Original thinking does not come from a void. It comes from the synthesis of ideas, which only happens when the external noise is dialed down.
It is a terrifying thought. We might be consuming more information than any generation in human history, yet we are thinking less deeply. But let us dig into why we do this. Why is it so hard to just sit still? I know people who physically cannot use the restroom without bringing their phone. It is not just a bad habit, it feels like a compulsion. This has to come down to how these technologies are engineered, right?
Absolutely. It comes down to dopamine and novelty. Modern applications are masterfully engineered around unpredictable rewards. Every time you swipe down to refresh a feed, you are pulling the lever of a slot machine. You don't know what you are going to get. A funny video, a distressing news headline, a message from a friend. That unpredictability creates massive dopamine spikes. Over time, your nervous system becomes hyper-adapted to this rapid, high-intensity input.
So our baseline for what feels normal gets completely skewed. A beautiful sunset or a quiet walk in the park suddenly feels agonizingly slow because it is not delivering a new piece of data every 3 seconds.
Exactly. You lose your tolerance for slower cognition. Deep work, sustained attention, reading a complex book, these things become physically uncomfortable because your brain is screaming for its quick novelty fix. And the part of your brain that is supposed to regulate this, the prefrontal cortex, becomes severely compromised.
The prefrontal cortex is essentially the CEO of the brain, right? The part responsible for executive function, decision-making, and self-control.
Yes. And constant task switching, the continuous fragmentation of your attention by notifications and endless scrolling overloads that CEO. It leads to decision fatigue and weakened reasoning. You become impulsive. You lose cognitive endurance. You sit down to write an important email or think through a complex problem, and 5 minutes later, you find yourself opening a social media app without even consciously deciding to do it.
I think everyone listening has experienced that exact phantom reflex. You unlock your phone to check the weather, and 20 minutes later, you are watching a video of a stranger cooking pasta, completely forgetting why you picked up the device in the first place. But I want to push this a bit deeper into the psychological or even philosophical realm. Beyond just the dopamine loops, is there an emotional reason we avoid stillness? Because sometimes sitting in silence does not just feel boring, it feels genuinely threatening.
That is a very perceptive point, and it is something modern psychology is looking at closely. Stillness forces confrontation. When you strip away the digital noise, what is left? Your own internal thoughts, your unresolved stress, your anxieties, your uncertainties about the future. For many people, constant digital stimulation functions as a form of emotional anesthesia.
Wow, emotional anesthesia. We are literally medicating ourselves with information so we do not have to feel our own feelings.
Exactly. If you are always listening to someone else's voice, you never have to listen to your own. The noise protects you from uncomfortable introspection. But the deep cost of that avoidance is that you never process those emotions. Long-term cognitive and psychological health requires internal processing capacity. You cannot outrun your own mind forever.
It makes you wonder about the great thinkers of the past. You look at historical records, and so many profound breakthroughs happened during moments of complete mundane idleness. Archimedes in the bathtub, Newton sitting under an apple tree, Einstein walking through the patent office. None of them were staring at screens. They were allowing their minds to wander.
And that is the diffuse attentional state in action. When you stop forcing your brain to focus on a specific, high-intensity external task, the neural connections naturally reorganize. You step back, and suddenly, the solution to a problem you have been agonizing over for weeks just pops into your head. It feels like magic, but it is just neuroscience. The brain needs cognitive breathing room to innovate. Great ideas demand temporary disconnection.
So, if constant stimulation is the disease, and we are losing our cognitive reserve, what does the future of health look like? We track our steps, we track our sleep, we monitor our heart rates, but it seems like we are completely ignoring the health of our attention.
I believe the next frontier of health optimization is going to be the aggressive protection of cognitive stillness. Future neuroscience and preventative medicine will likely treat silence, deep focus, nature exposure, and even intentional boredom not as lifestyle luxuries, but as critical, non-negotiable recovery tools. We will see digital detoxes prescribed the way we prescribe physical therapy. Because the data is becoming undeniable, the human brain cannot survive endless occupation. It requires cycles of input, followed by profound emptiness.
It is a radical shift in perspective. We have spent the last 2 decades treating boredom as an enemy to be eradicated at all costs. We built a trillion-dollar global economy on the promise of never being bored again. But perhaps boredom was never the enemy. Perhaps it was the gateway. The gateway to imagination, to synthesis, to emotional processing, and to original thought.
I could not agree more. The greatest threat to modern intelligence is no longer a lack of information. We have all the information in the world in our pockets. The true threat is the lack of neurological stillness. Creativity, empathy, and deep intelligence do not emerge from noise. They emerge from space.
If we want to reclaim our minds, we have to be brave enough to sit in the quiet. We have to learn how to be bored again.